Music man Rodney Sharman, our guest. He plays the flute. You haven't played the flute yet, but I think you can.
I do, but...
Do you practice in the morning?
Rarely.
What's the trick to playing that instrument?
I used to play well. I no longer play that well. But I came out of retirement this year to do a piece of Christopher Butterfield. He's a colleague in Victoria, and it was a piece for 23 flutes. And Mark McGregor, who's a wonderful flute player, asked me to come out of retirement. So I play once in a while, and I play for my students frequently.
Sure.
No, I don't have flute students, but I play for my composer students.
Composer students. Well, maybe when we finish, you can play us out.
I'll just play you a little bit of what, what I wrote in the Chamber Symphony.
In the Chamber Symphony, that would be lovely. Wait for it. Maybe we'll call your neighbors. So Colorful World, tell me about Colorful World starting on Sunday. The Turning Point, is it an ensemble or orchestra? Turning Point.
It's somewhere in between. It's called the Turning Point Ensemble, but it is somewhere between a chamber ensemble and a symphony orchestra. We call it in the business a sinfonietta, and that usually means one of each instrument. There are 2 clarinets and there are 2 violins, but it's one of each. 1 flute, 1 oboe, 2 clarinets, 1 bassoon, 1 trumpet, 1 horn, 1 trombone, 1 percussionist, 1 harp, one piano, and then the strings, 2 violins, viola, cello, and bass. Now, it takes me a long time. It takes a long time for me to list all of these instruments, so you can see it's a big ensemble. Not a symphony orchestra. It's smaller, but it means that it needs a conductor. It also means that the winds, I mean, you think about a symphony orchestra and how, a flute plays, the whole string section of maybe 60 people plays, and you hear the flute, right? So it means that you have to be very, very careful as a composer to make sure that the ensemble balances. So it's difficult to write it's difficult to write good music for this group. To write music really well for a sinfonietta takes tremendous skill. Writing for symphony orchestra, honestly, you give the low note to the cello, you give the next note to the viola, you give the next note to the second violins, you give the next note to and it sounds like $1 million. You can't. I mean, it's very difficult to write music for the orchestra that sounds bad. The orchestra, in and of itself, sounds so fantastic, but for a group like Turning Point, you have to have finesse, you have to have skill. Otherwise, the trumpet drowns out everybody, the trombone drowns out everybody. You can't hear any of the other instruments properly.
So that's what you mean by balance. You don't mute the trumpet or the trombone. Everybody's playing full, or you might in certain pieces of the piece. But you're right, because if you're fluting away and the trombone starts, trombone's usually a little louder than a flute.
Correct. It also means that the trombone player, who is in this case Jeremy Berkman, co-artistic director of the ensemble, that he has to play especially sensitively. So everybody in the ensemble has to play like a chamber musician and an orchestra musician. They rehearse more than most orchestras or most chamber groups do, and it shows. They're a beautiful, beautiful ensemble. Very nice to work with. I've been working with Owen Underhill for a very long time. He's been a great supporter of my music. So it's a nice group.
Did they originate here?
Yes, they did.
Turning Point. Now, this particular concert, there's you.
Yes.
One of your pieces. And a Japanese composer, Toru Takemitsu?
Correct, Toru Takemitsu.
Toru
Takemitsu. You've probably heard his music already because he was Kurosawa's favorite composer. And if you've seen that great film Ran, and this sort of music with, whoa, this sort of scary, big symphonic sound, that's Toru Takemitsu. He was the composer for Ran.
So he's sensual. It's very
sensual, wonderful. He talked about writing music as though silence were a piece of paper and that he was doing landscape painting on it. So it's a completely different approach, but there's a very, very close relationship between his music and silence, as well as his superb ability to write for orchestra. That's what we call colors in music. Right.
So that's
orchestration.
Hence the Colorful World.
Exactly. So when we speak of great orchestration, we're talking about musical color.
Old music, new music. Take the old music, make it sound new. Brand new music. What?
Well, there are 3 pieces. Actually, there are 5 pieces on the program. There's a piece by Toru Takemitsu, who has been a visitor to Vancouver. I guess he died maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I think, sort of, anyway, 1994-ish, I think, of Claude Debussy. And this is a piece for huge orchestra called Je. It was a ballet from, I think, 1912. It might have been 1913.
Je? J-E-U-X, Je?
That's right, games.
Games.
And it's actually the story of a ménage à trois. It's a ballet by Nietzsche. Exactly, it's two.
Dare you say?
Well, it was a scandal in Paris at the time because the choreography is a tennis match between two women and one man. And it is clear that there was an erotic connection between all three.
Wow, that's why you always need a good program. Because even though we think, we imagine when we hear music or when we're at a concert, you imagine, or at an opera, when you can't understand the words, you imagine, or at a silent film, you imagine. But it's great to read the program before and say, when he composed this, when he put this together, this was what was going on. And sometimes as simple as, this is what's happening.
Yes. Well, this piece is originally...
In case you don't get it.
Well, there won't be three dancers doing this, alas.
Right.
But it's a version for small orchestra for this sinfonietta by a local composer named Michael Bushnell. And Michael did the arrangement of the Firebird. Maybe you saw the Firebird ballet that was done with Simone Orlando's choreography and Josh Beamish
Didn't.
dancing. Okay. Well, the orchestra version of that for Turning Point was made by Michael Bushnell as well. He does a lot of this, and he's done a lot of work for Ballet BC. So he's a local composer too.
Sounds like a fantastic evening. 8 o'clock at the Fay and Milton Wong Experimental Theater, which is a beautiful theater.
It is a beautiful
theater. And I'm
theater.
assuming you'll be there.
I will be there.
So when your phone rings and it's somebody who's putting an opera together or wants a piece, how do you decide who you'll work with, who you won't compose for, or do you compose for yourself?
That is a fantastic question, and actually no one has ever asked me that before. And it's true, I'm one of the very, very fortunate people who get to say no. Most artists say yes all the time.
You know, it's about the money.
Because we're, you know, you freelance, you're like a goldfish. You take all this work and then you overfeed and die and float to the top. You know, so you have to be really careful not to take too much. I'm in a position right now where that's a little bit the case because I had two deadlines moved forward. One of them was Turning Point. This concert was to have been in March, and it's going to be this Sunday night, the 29th. So I had to work a little bit faster, a little bit smarter, a little bit more intense, and I had to turn down work. If James Kudelka, the wonderful choreographer who used to be with the National Ballet, if he asks me to do something, I always say yes. And I'm doing a piece with him right now. In fact, I'm in Toronto next week with workshops on a piece based on Edith Wharton's The House of Mirth.
Really? How wonderful, The House of Mirth. That will be fun. Now, when you say, I'm going to do Edith Wharton's The House of Mirth, do you want to read it, see it? Like, what's going on in your brain for you to start?
I read the novel, I watched the film. The film is with Gillian Anderson in the role of Lily.
Really, from X-Files?
And from X-Files, and she looks fantastic in period costume. She's dressed circa 1903, and she's wonderful in this piece. Dan Aykroyd as one of the sort of big, prosperous men, Laura Linney as her evil friend. It's the story of well, people probably know The Age of Innocence. That's the more famous book. This is less famous, but it's about a woman who's very beautiful. She's 26, she has to marry, she can't make up her mind, and she makes wrong decision after wrong decision after wrong decision and dies a drug addict and penniless, but with honor. But with honor,
hence the trombone comes in, or the flute, or what?
It's a smaller ensemble than that, but it's a very strange piece because the men sing, there are 4 male characters, and they all are singers, and 4 female dancers, and the dancers don't sing or speak at any point. So in a way, the piece is a tour de force for James because he's showing the power of dance. And I argued with him as persuasively as I could, saying, look, everyone in a piece that's vocal will wait for the woman to sing. They're going to wait for a female voice. You have to give voice to this. And so we did it in workshops with 4 male singers and with these dancers. And amazingly, James's choreography is so fantastic that you don't miss You don't miss that they're not speaking. They communicate through movement. So it's a kind of tribute to the power of dance.
And apparently the artiste is winning all the awards at the academies, and there's no words. The movie, there's no words. And the Day of the Silence, I have to see it. Must do that. What a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you and to be on the show.
Colorful
Thank you.
World will be 8 p.m. This Sunday. Faye Milton Wong, Experimental Theater, great theater. And will you play us 2 notes?
All right.
A scale?
Literally, it will be 2 notes because what this piece does, there's something that I use called a color tremolo. I go between 2 notes that have different colors. So here's the regular note and a note that's the same but with a different color. So literally 2 notes.
Same note that was, but different
colors, correct.
See what you learn every day.
And poor Brenda Federer has to do this time and time and time again.
Well, how nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Rodney Sharman, composer extraordinaire.